Yes.
Teri, if you want to introduce yourself and just start us off.
Hi everyone, I'm Councilwoman Teri Castillo and I'm proud to represent the working people of District 5. I'm a lifelong intergenerational resident and have worked alongside many of the folks up here around housing justice here in San Antonio. And I'm looking forward to participating in this conversation around the importance of tenant organizing, and especially with the passage of the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan that has presented, or proposed rather, that the city of San Antonio is going to shift towards becoming a majority renter city. I think it's important that we have this conversation around tenants and tenants' rights. With that, I'll pass it over to Rich for folks to start giving a 3-minute introduction about yourself.
Richard Costa, president of My City is My Home, Mi Ciudad es Mi Casa. We are a nonprofit organization that gathers real estate professionals to provide the professional resources for low-income homeowners or low-income renters for free. Our main thing when we're helping out low-income renters, we do a lot of housing location and advocacy.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm from District 5. I'm a housing justice organizer on the website. I was on a Paki tenant at public housing. I'm here representing the Coalition for Tenant Justice, as well as the Peace and Justice Center, and the Democratizing Youth for Justice with the UTSA. We have spent the last several years doing a lot of housing work with tenant-led movements, tenant-led conversations, and we continue to push for renters' rights in San Antonio and equal treatment of all residents.
Hi, my name is Tanya Lavelle. I'm with Disability Rights Texas. We are the federally mandated protection advocacy agency for people with disabilities. My organization focuses on protecting the rights of pretty much any rights, I guess, of somebody, a person with a disability, whether that be around housing, transportation, voting. We pretty much cover the gamut, and we also are a statewide organization. I personally am a policy specialist with the Housing, Transportation, and Disaster team. I'm one of the few folks at Disability Rights who's not an attorney. I am a public policy human. I do government relations work. So I spend a lot of time at the Capitol, different state agency offices, advocating for primarily the housing rights of people with disabilities. People with disabilities make up a disproportionate number of the homeless population. And across the state, unfortunately, there have been a lot of statewide attacks on the homeless population in particular. When it comes to things like camping bans, in Austin we're having a lot of issues trying to convert hotels into low-income permanent supportive housing developments. So with that in mind, a lot of the work that I'm doing is trying to highlight the rights of people with disabilities, especially those who rent, especially in light of COVID-19, how that's impacted people with disabilities, how it's impacted the renter population in general. And there's actually a hearing tomorrow at the legislature to talk about some funding options. So that is what I do.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey. I here represent TOP, Texas Organizing Project. Texas Organizing Project is a nonprofit organization. It operates out of Dallas County, Harris County, as well as Bexar County. We organize and mobilize with Black and Hispanic communities all throughout the state, and we are working to make Texas a better place to live. Generally speaking, we take a two-pronged approach in building political power as well as people power. And as it pertains to housing, we are working in tandem with Texas Housers to push for tenant bill of rights and protect renters, the rights of renters all throughout San Antonio, and hopefully still some events, state legislature, and the national legislature as well. I am currently a member of the Housing Justice Campaign, and that's pretty much it.
Hi, I'm Lula Greco. I am the Community Equity Analyst at Texas Housers, and my work
Before we dive into the conversation, I wanted to thank the community organizations that are present here today, like the Good Samaritan, Disability Rights, San Antonio Alliance, DOLE, and the Neighborhood and Housing Services Department. Thank y'all for being here and connecting folks to services and any much needed information. With that, right, we know that when we talk about any movement or rights within the context of the United States, oftentimes, right, rights aren't just given to individuals, right? No matter what community we talk about, it takes communities organizing and coming forward with a list of demands. So with that, I want to learn, how does your organization rely on community involvement? And we can go ahead and start with Rich for this question and work our way down.
For community involvement, really it's what we're trying to hopefully accomplish is try to put faces to the renters population, to the low-income homeowner population, because a lot of times when people think about who's affordable housing for, they are just thinking about somebody that whatever comes into their mind of a non-deservable, you know, that this person doesn't deserve to be here if they can't afford it, they don't deserve this or that, but they're not seeing the senior citizen that is surviving off of Social Security. They don't see the person that's suffering from a disability, and they don't see all the families and the history of the crises that has happened to them. And so it really takes getting out there into the community and then not just preaching to the community, but showing the different people that are in it and that are being affected, so that way, you know, everybody can really see that it's your neighbors that are suffering, and that's what we're all fighting for at the end of the day.
Community involvement is paramount. It's the only way to move forward. A lot of us grew up around and have been around, whether through work or school or our daily lives, the top-down method that the majority of the country uses, and that's the wrong way to go. You need to start from the bottom up. You need to have the people that are most impacted, that have that lived experience at the table and leading the charge. Because anyone can tell me from another country, another state, another city, this is what you need to do to make your life better. But they don't know. They don't walk in my shoes. They don't live in my neighborhood. They don't know what it's like. The only people that should be in charge of their lives are the individuals themselves. And the communities, the ties, the sense of connection that we have within our neighborhoods and the social networks that we create over decades, that is the most important thing. So 100% community involvement is absolutely necessary.
I'll echo something.
Yes.
Kayla mentioned in the term, which I'm forgetting. I've got 2 kids and I don't remember anything anymore, so I do apologize for that. One was really little. But self-direction is kind of something that is at the core of what we do at Disability Rights, which is, it's really important for people with disabilities because oftentimes laws, rules, regulations, anything, a lot of the times they're made without the input of people with disabilities and people in the community. And so at Disability Rights, one of the primary things we do, first of all, we represent the community. People give us a call and say, my rights are being violated, here's how can you help me? And that's what we do. So unless people come and tell us what to be on the lookout for, unless we're able to sort of track what's happening in the community, we can't, effectively do our job and fulfill the purpose that the feds have sort of given us to do at the state level. And then also within the organization itself, we set our priorities every couple of years based on community interviews and community surveys. We ask the folks in, across Texas what's important to them, what we need to be on the lookout for, what folks need help with in terms of their rights as persons with disabilities. And so that, in and of itself is sort of, excuse me, at the center of what we do as an organization, and we always try really hard to make sure that we're working with community groups, not just, in my case, not just government agencies or nonprofits. We're really making sure that we are working on the ground with people who are living the realities every day. Excuse me.
With top, I would say that community involvement kind of guides the work that is done. I think of it kind of like this, with one powerful story that's adequate. Whether it's a bad situation for a landlord or struggling to get your deposit back. One story, one powerful story, that's an anecdote. But if you have 2, 3, 5, 10, 100, then you start to see a trend. So by using these trends, we can build a case to make a demand towards the powers that be to meet the needs of community. So in that way, community is setting our goals, is setting kind of the agendas, as well as kind of doing the necessary on-the-ground work to make sure these policies pass. Whether that is canvassing, whether that is phone banking or text banking, whether that's relational organizing, talking with your neighbors, community plays a pivotal role in not only people power, but in making the government kind of move and react to the needs of the people.
Yeah, and I guess with the work that we do at Texas Housers, our organization focuses on different priorities and different aspects, but as part of my role is I really speak with different members of the community every single day, honestly. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives that they have to offer on the same issue, and just because someone's in the same social class as you doesn't necessarily need to share the same perspectives as you. So it's really important that you go into the community, talk with these different perspectives, and to understand how would they kind of really help each other, I guess, thrive is what I'm trying to say. Community involvement is at the cornerstone of everything that we do, because the community is the one that's living that experience, and they're just like Kayla said, if we took this top-down method, we would really be neglecting a lot of different voices that really should be elevated. So it's important to have the community and to have their voices elevated, because if you don't, then you are going to end up with some policies that don't necessarily serve the people, but serve special interests. So it's very imperative that you include community whenever you're having discussions about what needs to be done, especially if it's in their own community.
Yeah, so with housing work, right, it's very broad, right? There's land use, zoning, affordability, there's homeownership, renters, protections. But at the core of all of y'all's work, right, is ensuring that the impacted communities are leading and steering the direction of policy change and priorities. And that's something that I hear from each of you all and the work that you all do with the community. And Tanya touched on it a bit, right? Collaboration. What opportunity do you all see in collaborating with organizations that share similar missions and goals and have, ensuring that impacted communities are leading? And we can start at the very end with this one.
Yeah, okay, so, oh my God, you caught me off guard there, Terry. So with this, when it comes to collaboration, honestly, even, if you even take a look at this event itself, I could have never been here without the collaborative efforts of, Esperanza and Talk, and My City is My Home, and Disability Rights Texas, and everyone that decided to be here. I think it's very important that when it comes to collaboration, it just, you can kind of see it like a spider web or like some type of networking where, everyone's connected in some shape or form or manner, and that really helps solidify everyone's missions. Whereas maybe disability rights and, something like criminal justice doesn't really seem intersected whatsoever. there is going to be those cases in which people have suffered, some type of criminal justice issue as a result of being disabled or whatever other reason, right? And in those cases, when you really need to focus on that issue and that idea of intersectionality, because all of these issues that we bring up and that the community brings up can intersect at a certain point, one or another, and that's really important when it comes to collaborating with different organizations, talking to different people outside of the scope of your knowledge, because I think it's definitely important to, reach out to people and talk to people, because I can personally say that I don't know everything there is to know about housing. I don't know everything there is to know about organizing. Whatever it is, that's why I rely on my peers and other organizations that have that type of knowledge, or the manpower, or the network, and that way we can really collaborate with one another to kind of expand important issues and really elevate all these important solutions that we could potentially find as we work together.
From my perspective, it is, well, two things come to mind. First, it always be things like relationship organizing. All of us here in this room have neighbors, have friends, have family members. We're all connected in that way. And I may not be the best person to, talk to your grandmother about housing. You might be the best person to, pick the right words, have the right appeals towards them, to convince them, to bring them on our side, or to put a lot of your grievances into words that are actionable. So by collaborating with other organizations, we have access to the network of people they know. We have access to their community, and we can build a bigger movement moving forward. Secondly, it pertains to the wealth of knowledge. If you live life, you have some knowledge, you have different perspective. And all those perspectives are going to be very, very important, whether it is crafting policy or crafting demands to be made of the government. So, people like me, I don't know much personally, I'm being honest. I rely heavily on the smart people who are also on this panel with me. But, for example, if we are pushing for things like affordability, we're looking at maybe the trends of houses being built, type of houses being built, or type of houses stock being built. Maybe the church might have information that pertains to that, and there'll be a beacon of light when crafting policy in that area. If we're speaking to the ways that the current housing falls flat for our disabled allies, you may be able to speak to that. I'm sorry. It's fine. But you may be able to speak to that and shine a light on that. So simply put, collaboration is necessary because it can allow us to bridge those communication gaps and access a bunch of different networks to build a movement. And second of all, it gives us access to a lot more knowledge so we can have more precise demands as well as more specific policy proposals that actually affect people generally.
I will echo my esteemed colleague from top in a lot of what he said, especially with regard to his first point, kind of about different perspectives and different messaging. As somebody who works with the legislature, I often did not have to work with people who don't necessarily have a nuanced understanding of housing, and that's totally acceptable because housing is very complex and it's difficult, and it looks really different depending on, on one neighborhood to the next, let alone a state. So with that in mind, one of the most important parts of my job is working with folks in communities where they are as much as I can, because when you're working with legislators, I don't carry nearly as much weight as somebody from their district. Voters, all of y'all in here, you're a voter, and that makes you the most powerful person in the room. Because if you go into a legislator's office, if you call up, a councilman, an HOA member, anybody, and say that I'm a voter, that is so impactful. Way more than me going in there with my flyer full of wonderful data that I often get from David Wheaton, who is the policy person of the Housers, because I'm not voting. So I always wish that the community members would understand how impactful that is and how powerful that makes them, that their vote is the most important, weapon, if you will, to help get anything passed. For the change that you want to see in your community, if you're able to vote, that's all of it. So that really is kind of the primary way that I try and work with the community, is try to help them understand not, just the information I'm doing, trying to, help people connect with the right folks. It's also just to help folks understand their power.
Well, that's hard to follow up. They pretty much mentioned a lot of it, but I would have to say, me personally, I am a public housing tenant. I am a single mom. I do have a disabled son. I have a disabled brother. My mom, before she passed, was disabled. My children's father is an immigrant. I've dealt with the criminal justice system. You start to see these patterns over and over again. It's not just one thing, it's a pile of things. And it's history is behind the way that people have been treated over generations. It's not just happening today, it's not just happening in the last 20 years, it's been happening for hundreds of years. And once you start making those relationships with additional groups, you start to see that you're working on the same thing. Something that we all realized since the pandemic and Zoom, we were literally the same group of people going from one meeting to the next to the next. And once you start collaborating, you're able to expand. You're able to expand the amount of work that's being done, but also hone in on the most important issues. I would also say that, I am a member of CHOP as well, but I'm also a member of national organizations like Right to the City and Homes for All, and the National Association of HUD Tenants. And going to those types of gatherings, that peer sharing, that information and knowledge wealth sharing, and hearing that, we're here fighting this in San Antonio, and then over there in Austin, Boston is fighting the same exact thing, and then Smash Miami is fighting the same exact thing in their city. We're able to collaborate a bigger movement, and we're able to learn on our successes.
I get to cheat a little bit because I can be reminded about what the original question was, and it's to collaborate effectively. How can we do that? And I'm going to go through a negative route on that because you guys were being way too positive. All right. So what I've been a part of several collaborations with in San Antonio, and I really do mean by a group of organizations that have nothing to do with each other, are all of a sudden working together to accomplish a goal. And the failures of collaborations that I've seen in the past is a unspecified goal. Having we all just want to do good things together, right? That's it. We want to do housing together. It's like that's not specific enough, because housing is housing for who? Housing for people with disabilities, housing for homelessness. That could go into homelessness and you have a disability, And so it can go into so many subcategories of housing and different things. So make sure that any collaboration that is done is either it's kind of think about it as if this is going to be a long-term cooperative working arrangement, or is this gonna be for a short term? We're here together to work on tenants' bill of rights, something specific. We're trying to get people to sign up. We're trying to get this thing passed. That is a short, objective, attainable goal that we can all work together to do so. But that doesn't mean that it can't turn into long-term collaboration in the sense that we go on from here. We started working with Esperanza, with Peace and Justice for, with Alazan. Alazan fighting back, being demoed, and everybody being displaced. And we're still working with them today. That was an objective that not everybody that worked on that part is still with us today. Not the same organizers are different, maybe the different organizations, but that's not a bad thing. Just because you guys work together for one objective and stop working with each other, that doesn't mean your bridges are burnt. It's that you guys met the goal that you wanted to and you moved on, and maybe in a few months from now we'll find a new reason to come together again. And so just I would just say to make your collaboration successful is, if you guys are coming together to accomplish that mission, it's okay just to come together to accomplish that mission.
Yeah, and again, right, with any fight, you don't just go in, punch once, right? You need to hit from different angles, have a combo, right? And it's going to take collaboration in different organizations with different expertise, different strategy, but again, right, working towards that same goal. And in regards to tenants' bill of rights, why do you all see the importance of leading from the bottom up, right? Bringing community in this fight. Why do you all believe that this is what we need to do within? And we can start with Kayla and then work our way down.
So, if you guys look at your pamphlets, you'll see a little bit of history around the Tenant Bill of Rights. It was actually four Saha tenants that started this. Four different properties. I was one of them, and we were also working around several different things. Like we were having conversations about renters commission, and we were fighting against substandard living conditions, and that's kind of what brought us together. And while we're working through these issues, we can sit there and go line by line through what the law is and through what our leases say, and then what our lived experiences are. That is starting from the bottom up. If you're not dealing with tenants on renters issues, then you're in the wrong place. We don't need a landlord to come tell us, or a developer to come tell us what an issue as a renter is. The developer's not living in the property. They don't have to deal with it day to day. They don't know any other obstacles, such as a food desert, or transportation, or the schools which kids are enrolled in. Being a renter is, well, should I say, should not be different than being a homeowner. You should have the same rights, and you should have the same say in what is happening in your life. But for some reason, the word renter is degraded. It's put down. It's less than, and that is not the case. Every single person should have equal say. So without that bottom, starting at the bottom with the impacted people, then they don't know what the real problems are. They know what the perceived problems are.
So I haven't done a ton of work locally in San Antonio. I know it's a great document, and I'm super excited to try and support it as much as I can. In terms of the San Antonio Bill of Rights, Renters Bill of Rights, at least from my experience, I know that something similar was tried in Houston a couple of years back. And I worked with Housers to try and get that going, and it didn't pick up enough pace to make it through the legislative process. And so I think that looking at what's happening in San Antonio and the bottom approach, this is, it's kind of a key, it's it's a really interesting contrast. It's like, well, we're starting here now at the bottom with renters, with the folks with lived experience who are going through this all the time. This is going to look a lot different than where things started out at the legislature a couple of years back when we were, I don't think folks really did a great job of trying to illustrate the need, illustrate the problem. It was really important. A lot of this stuff actually looks very similar to the San Antonio version. And at least in my opinion, I think having these meetings, working together in a big, kind of group with all these organizations working, with one goal in mind, is going to make this more effective. And so I think that, this is essentially, it's kind of like a case study in what to be doing, is to work with folks on the ground who are doing these things and not kind of looking upward to see who can keep things moving, if you will. And, you mentioned landlords, developers. They have a lot more resources than the community does, but they don't have the same impact, at least in my opinion.
I think working bottom up is very, very important, and it is key for two reasons. I'm going to cover two reasons. First, we are becoming like a renter majority city, so we're going to see a whole lot more renters. So passing things like a tenant bill of rights seems like just common sense. I've never seen a situation in my entire life where more rights is a bad thing. That just seems kind of counterintuitive. So that's the first thing. The second thing is tenants have an intimate understanding of like the nuances of the problems that currently affect them. Whether it is, whether it is maintenance requests not being filled out on time, whether it is people entering their apartments at all hours of the day without any type of heads up, whether it is landlords intimidating them with eviction notices that aren't like up to snuff, whether it's them struggling to get their deposit back. Tenants understand the issues they are facing, so they must have a seat at the table. They must be the primary voice if we're trying to craft legislature or make demands of the city to actually address those issues. Yeah. That's it.
Okay. Well, I guess, again, talking about bottom up, working from bottom up, let's go ahead and talk about the top really quick, right? Like we mentioned, San Antonio is quickly becoming a renter majority city, and a lot of, there's some powerful interests when it comes to landlords and apartment associations, and that's not to say that all landlords are bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just that some, in particular, I'm going to point out Shippy Properties, which if you haven't heard of him, you should definitely look him up. He basically wrote an entire book on how to achieve financial freedom by an early age. But unfortunately, he achieves financial freedom at the cost of many people and many properties that he manages and looks over. He cuts on maintenance costs. He buys the cheapest appliances, so that way whenever they break down, the tenants are obligated to pay for them out of their own pocket. And again, it's the cheapest appliances, so they're constantly breaking down. He has, written an entire book on how to essentially be a slumlord. So when you have powerful interests like that, this guy has become a millionaire off of these type of practices. And like I said, not all landlords are bad, but when you're explicitly telling other people to exploit those who are most vulnerable, that's a problem. So when you have powerful interests like that, it's extremely important to work from the bottom up because money talks. Unfortunately, whatever you want to say, money talks. And when powerful interests like a specific landlord has tons of money, they also have tons of sway. The San Antonio Board of Realtors, I think, or SABOR for short, also has a ton of sway within the city. And they're not always necessarily looking out for the best interest of the community. They're looking out for their own best interests that make the most money, that are most profitable. So whenever you're thinking about bigger interests, they are usually not on your side, not on the side of the person who is living in a moldy apartment with their 2 children, and their children are getting sick because of the air-infested mold. It's very impactful whenever you talk to tenants and they're experiencing these situations firsthand, and it's really upsetting. These tenants will come to us and they will be speaking through tears, and they will completely just break out crying because of how awful their conditions are at times, and how frustrated and how upset they are with the things that are happening. So that's why it's so important to collect those types of stories, to collect those experiences, because the powerful interests that play at the top are just playing with people's lives essentially, and that's not okay. And I don't even think that that's something that I should have to say outright. That's something that people should just inherently know. You should not be playing with people's lives in order to make more money when you're already a millionaire. So working from that bottom up approach, the Tenant Bill of Rights has really, like Kayla said, it has a long history of where it's gotten to where it is now. And it has been based a lot with community discussion, people coming in, providing their input, and talking about their own lived experiences and why they think it's important that certain things should be included within the bill, which is exactly what bottom-up approach is. We're talking with community. We are doing our best to listen to every different type of perspective and make the best with what we got. And if we're standing up to powerful interests and have a lot of money, well, we need a lot of people. So they can't shut us down if we are over-numbering them. So that's just something that I like to think about. One person with millions of dollars doesn't stand a chance against thousands of people. So.
Oh, I'll be short and sweet. I tried to just get renters' rights stuff from top bottom, just going straight over there talking to people, but for some reason everybody with money doesn't really want to give renters' rights. So I guess we got to get the renters to go and make them change their mind, right? I had a council member when we were trying to bring up get some renters' rights policies passed, that we had brought in email. We had renters email them. Then we had some letters made showing their voices and them signing it. And here's some voices and everything. And then the council member says well, why didn't they show up? And we're like, well, they're working and everything like that. And he's like, well, if this was serious, then they would come. So now we just need to get a whole bunch of people that happen to not be working all the time, and now we can really show up, right? I know that probably wasn't the best answer, but you guys know what I'm trying to say. We gotta go from bottom up, because the powers that be wants business to be as usual, and in order to change so, you just gotta bring the people.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Things that win issue-based campaigns is organized money or organized people. So in regards to the movement around the Tenants Bill of Rights, can we have a conversation around what that movement looks like and how we can get folks involved into that process and into that fight? We can start with Tanya and then work our way from Kayla to Bridget.
I would love to follow somebody who's actually doing it right.
Kayla.
That's it.
Okay, yeah. Well, right now, the document has evolved so much over the past couple of years, and at the current time, Top and Hausers are leading the campaign and the charge on getting involved. So you can contact Top, you can contact Hausers, you can contact Esperanza Peace and Justice Center or the Coalition for Tenant Justice, My City, My Home. There's also PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation. You can contact any of these groups. We are all involved with the Tenant Bill of Rights. And you can also give us your comments, like what do you see? What is your story? What is happening in your home that needs to change? And that's the best way to get involved. A lot of people are afraid of retaliation, and you know, as someone who is one of the principal leaders of the Alabama Apache fight, I can tell you retaliation is a real thing, and it does happen. But when you are standing with a group of people that believe the same and are fighting for the same thing, you're a lot better protected than on your own. You have to make a choice. You can either sit by and allow things to happen, or you can take a stand and you can use your voice. And your voice is the most powerful thing you can ever use. So take that chance, get involved.
I would tell you to volunteer with My City is My Home, but unless you just wrote down my organization name, you probably are going to misspell, forget the is or whatever. So just go to Top, Texas Organizing Project, TOP, put TOP, renters' rights. You'll find you're in the right spot. And get involved, because we need people. One of the biggest things that we're going to need people is to get out there, because not everybody has the Facebook, the Twitters, or everything else like that. We're going to need people to show up and go door knocking, call people. That's what's going to be necessary to get this progressed and get some wins in there is the volunteers to actually come out and get people to show up to education events like this and to eventually get out to vote.
Yeah, okay. So, like Kayla had mentioned, Tenant Bill of Rights has gone through a variety of versions. Right now, Texas Organizing Project and Texas Housers are taking the lead on the campaign. If you look at your pamphlets, there's 2 QR codes at the bottom that explain why we need a Tenant Bill of Rights and what is a Tenant Bill of Rights. So feel free to look into those. They can definitely provide you more information as to what the campaign is, how to get involved. We have online petitions circulating around, which I believe the QR code might have been updated to include those online petitions. We have physical petitions that are at Aaron's table over there. And then also, I think I gave some to Top as well, so they have some over there. And like they mentioned, it'll take, some people don't have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram or whatever it is. But what it's going to take is knocking on people's doors, talking to them, understanding, and actually taking the time to listen to the things that, you know, that they're trying to tell you, because sometimes people just get so frustrated. They're like, oh, you're like the 4th person that has come like this year to talk to me about like my living conditions. Like, I know that they're crappy. Like, you don't have to tell me, you know, and they're just tired of it. So like, essentially, like what we want to do is really motivate these people to come out and show out that we're actually trying to get something substantial done. So I really encourage you guys to look at those like different resources, and feel free to come and talk to us afterwards to learn a little bit more.
With the Tenant Bill of Rights, well, the rights at face value, they are convincing enough. Like, you don't have to jazz it up or nothing. They are convincing on face value. So if people want to get involved, help push it to be, you know, passed with our city government and whatnot, I'd recommend signing petitions, taking a petition and talking with your neighbors. Like, hey, Tenant Bill of Rights, this is a very, very good thing that people are trying to do to improve the living conditions of tenants so they can have a safe place to live, so they can not fear discrimination or retaliation from their landlords, so they can hold landlords accountable if they violate tenants' rights in general, so that they can get, what's it called, fair compensation and restorative justice rather than putting eviction on their history, so that we can, you know, have a more equitable system for tenants living in San Antonio. Rents are going up. People are paying a lot of money to rent. They should at least have these levels of protection. So if you're trying to get involved, trying to make sure this thing passes, I hope you recommend grabbing a petition, distributing it with people you know, showing up to some of these meetings, voicing your grievances if you are a tenant. Because again, it takes one anecdote, 2, 5, 10, 100. Then we can see a trend and we can make very, very specific demands of our government so our needs are met.
And I'll echo, you know, I guess sort of just conclude that all the things you guys have been hearing, not a lot of it, it's not a heavy lift. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from what we're discussing up here, is that you can make a ton of impact by not doing all that much. You know, folks count the number of petitions that come through. They look at how many signatures there are there. If you have time to, you know, email one of your elected officials, email, you know, folks who need, you know, to hear from you, they take note of that. And, you know, things like that don't take a lot of time. They don't take a lot of effort, but you get a real big bang for your buck that way. And same with talking with your neighbors, talking with your family. Like you're going to people from a place of trust already. And then hopefully, you know, discussions like that, they can very organically lead to, you know, I think it's what you all said, the spiderweb effect. Like it goes. And so, you know, just doing something as small as telling your neighbor to be like, oh, this is awful. Here's something that, you know, we're trying to do to make it less awful. That in turn can just, you know, it's like a domino effect. It can just keep going. And you really do get a lot accomplished that way. And if there was anything coming from, you know, somebody who has to do a lot of, you know, kind of the more political side of things, it can be pretty scary to think about doing things like that, and especially from, you know, the tenant perspective, when you're going up against, you know, possible retaliation. Like this stuff has major, real impacts on your life, and that 100% is the case with, you know, the people that I work with disabilities across the state. It's really important, like, you know, like Kayla said, this is, you know, kind of a life and death thing. Like, especially with people with disabilities, housing is life and death, not just for somebody with a disability. Anybody, if you don't have a safe place to live, if you don't have a safe place to put your head at night, I don't know how anyone can expect anybody to be successful that way. And getting that message across to people who are making these decisions is so important. And the way that comes through best and most convincingly is if it comes from the people who are living it.
Yes, absolutely. And for folks who may be hesitant to getting involved because you hear retaliation, you know, that fear is valid. And, you know, I always remind folks whenever we have visitors at City Hall and we bring guests in, right, that the power seat in that chambers, it's not my seat, it's not the mayor's seat, it's that podium, right? Because we work for the residents of San Antonio, whether you're a resident, whether you're a citizen, whether you're a registered voter, you know, we work for you all. And the power of that podium, you know, we have to listen and acknowledging that as a tenant, as a renter, you are an expert in that lived experience that many folks in these positions and in these seats do not have. So just reminding individuals that they're the experts with that experience, and folks need to learn from it and hear from it. But before we move over to the Q&A, I wanted to quickly read this blurb from the Tenant Bill of Rights within the community list here, Power to the People Community Fair pamphlet. It reads, the Tenant Bill of Rights was born in 2019 when impacted tenants from 4 public housing properties came together to fight for expanded protections for public housing tenants in San Antonio. After internal discussions, these tenants initiated conversations with then District 1 Councilmember Roberto Davino to explore the ways in which their discussions could become policy. In the years since its inception, tenants from a multitude of different properties have contributed to this bill, helping it grow into a campaign that protects all tenants of San Antonio. We are eternally grateful for the Coalition of Tenant Justice, Robert Trevino's office, the Sons of Peace and Justice Center, San Antonio Tenants Union, Texas Housers Leadership Academy, Class of 2021 Fellows, and Texas Organizing Project for all their hard working in the progression of this bill. But with that, we can open it up to Q&A if any folks in the audience have any questions regarding tenant organizing and the Tenant Bill of Rights. Do you have any questions?
I like the part. Okay, I'm a participant in the city of San Antonio in the Commander's House, and I've been going there, you know, with their support and becoming an artist to try to become independent. And I bridged over to the Virginia Bill Committee Center where they got an acting program where I just started registering to become like an actor or try to get into some tips and to get into an actor's guild so I could be independent on the housing, in the housing authority. I like to point out the question is if you said about I've been in the housing, but the refrigerator is giving me problems because the food is not staying fresh and everything. I don't know how to address that to get a new one, to get a new unit, you know, because I'm kind of like, I don't know if I how to ask the landlord. I don't want to make it seem like he's a slumlord, but I just gotta, you know, get some kind of some help on trying to address the situation to the landlord.
Yeah, we can, after we're done here, I'll, talk to you about how to address that, but but in general, you gotta send in a work order, but you must have it in writing. That's the first thing that you must always do. Don't ever ask your landlord to do anything by phone. If you do end up talking to your landlord in person or by phone, always follow it up with an email or something in writing to confirm that they agree to. So like for your refrigerator issue, when you bring that up to your landlord, if you happen to have an email or you have some kind of a letter that you can write to hey, this is jotted down, I spoke to this person on this date, who it was, what time it was, and have that written down, because if anybody ever indicates that you hadn't done so or anything, you have proof of such. And that's the most important thing, because if it's in writing, it's something that you can prove in a situation of dispute. So, but I can definitely talk to you more about that after we're done here.
Have something in writing.
Yes.
I could confirm email. Okay, I could start that. They're part of the Lavaca, I think they are Lavaca, the one off of Cesar Chavez, the Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
I missed the meeting. They got another one on the 24th, on May 24th. And I wanted to find out, like, because they are building the new units, and I wondered if we could make a transition, because this property, the unit I'm in is probably already getting run down already. So I wonder how you make the transition into the new unit. You know, with this, I guess with the same paperwork, with the same support,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, if it's with the housing authority, you usually have to request a transfer. And if it's medically related, then you have to provide the documentation to the housing authority. It's an unfortunate situation that wait lists are extremely long, and many of the properties have their own wait lists. So you can be waiting 10 years on one property but get into another property within a couple of years. So it really depends on where you're trying to go. The coalition works with tenants all of the time, so you can get with us after. And we can walk you through that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for the question. Are there any additional questions?
Is it like, I have a question. So is this like gonna get voted on soon, or just feel like a petition where people start to like, kind of like voice it over?
Well, would you mind taking?
Yeah, so, this is still in its like petition phase right now. So what we're doing, the reason that we're still in the petition phase is the fact that we really want to show like council members that they have people in their districts that are supporting this like legislation. There's like a lot of like, I guess mechanics about when you're like talking to like city council and everything, and I know Teri can definitely attest to this, right? But essentially, like we are trying to build up like that support right now. So our goal as of right now is 300 signatures from each city council district, so like 1 through 10, and that way it can show like the council, the city council, that this is like an evenly supported like piece of writing that people want within the city of San Antonio. That's why we're still like trying to mobilize people. We're trying to get those petitions signed. I mean, I don't want to like jinx anything, but hopefully by June or something, we can get this to city council and, you know, actually present it to them. And then from then, we'll like see how it goes.
So if you are a renter or a homeowner or whoever, a resident of San Antonio, and you care about renters' rights, and let me give you one example of a right that we're talking about. The right to organize. We're talking about trying to get people to step up and everything. It's like renters don't even have the right to organize. So if you're trying to ask, it's like, well, what rights don't they have? They don't have so homeowners, do you have the right to organize? You can organize an HOA, a neighborhood association, but what if an entity told you that you can't organize? You know, none of you homeowners can have a community meeting in your neighborhood. You can't. You're not allowed to. You know, your HOA says no parties in the park. No, you can't do it. You can't have a group meeting. That was a horrible example, but you can't organize. But basically, you can't organize. And that's what tenants, that is just one of many rights tenants do not have. And so if you believe that at the very least, tenants should have the ability to organize and be able to get their rights and talk and address some of the issues that they are all sharing, then you post so many dumb things on Facebook. I know you all do. So you know, you post on Twitter what's going on with Kim Kardashian. So post, let people know about this tenant petition, share it around, get people to sign up, show that San Antonians care about what's going on in Kim Kardashian's life and also tenants' rights. Is that good?
Yeah. I think that should be the campaign slogan. Well, I want to thank all those panelists and the work that each of you and your organizations do for the city of San Antonio. And thanks for everyone for coming out and listening and asking questions. And hopefully folks continue to get involved and help the organizations up here continue to push this forward. Thank you.